input session in the downtown. And my reason for saying that is, as you recall, just at last week's meeting? No, it was this week's GIC. This item 5.4, status of discussions for partnering opportunities with Evergreen City Works and Hamilton Community Foundation. So it's a status update, and basically the city is well on its way to negotiating a consulting assignment to the tune of $650,000 with a major planning firm, which would cover off the downtown, the neighborhoods, Harborfront, and Pier 4. So if the city's going to be spending that amount of money, and the funds have been identified, $500,000 from Hamilton Community Foundation, $150,000 from the city, is that the right time to be doing something that might be seen as redundant, or is even contradictory to the work that they're being hired to do? That would be my suggestion for you. Do you really want to at this point in time? You're asking for additional money to do something that money's just been found to do. The other thing is, just in terms of what documents currently guide us, just sort of looking back, everybody remember that's currently the strategy that's in place, right? The downtown secondary plan, and that's what we work from, and every 5 years that gets updated. There's been a couple of other documents that have been done. 2008, Hamilton Community Foundation did this one. They funded that, Downtown Community Revitalization. We funded the Canadian Urban Institute in January 2010 to do that one. And the updates to the downtown secondary plan are underway now. So Alyssa McClure is working on the 5-year review of that. So my suggestion is there's another opportunity to have input to that work. So I would suggest, I've been trying to reach her, but she's off this week, to say, can this committee have a voice on your downtown secondary planning? However that works, to have the input into that. So that would be my suggestions for you. It's a system that's already in place. There's 2 opportunities. One is when Evergreen starts their work, and secondly, as the downtown secondary plan gets its review done this year.
Thank you. Questions for Glenn? Kathy?
What is the goal of that? The call for
This one here?
The Evergreen?
No.
The Evergreen?
No, the Evergreen.
So it's not my report, right? This is coming out of the city manager's office. I wasn't involved in the crafting of it at all.
So this was on the agenda for last week?
It was on the agenda for last week. It was approved. I brought a copy of it, but just as an example, because I understand you wanted to do some consultation and some engagement and so on with stakeholders. So one of the things they've said here, just reading from the report, in particular, the physical planning process for specific plans will include extensive public consultation, workshops, open houses, charrettes, and web-based crowdsourcing and community competitions will be used to engage the public. So I think the things that you're looking for are contemplated in this, is what I'm saying. And maybe what we need to do is to, if this doesn't go ahead, I think we revert back to Plan B, which is proceed with your own. But I think
It was approved last night.
it was approved last time? Okay. So that's a big exercise. A $650,000 plan exercise is a very large exercise.
And how long, oh sorry, through the chair, Glenn, how long is this project supposed to take?
I don't know exactly yet.
Is it like a year or?
Through the chair back to Terry. I don't know exactly. Hopefully maybe the councillor who's been involved in discussions can tell you. I don't see it in here. It looks like it's something that starts right away. And
It has started.
It has started. So my suggestion is that the time frame is probably fairly short, but maybe the councillor can elaborate for us.
I don't think that it's been established. I think they have a 650, and that number, it took some time to figure out what's it going to take to assist, particularly in the engagement part of it. I think they're going to be here till the job's done, and I don't think it's going to be wham bam and out the door in 2 months or anything like that. It's safe to say probably a year, probably maybe more, working with us.
So you won't expect then, Mr. Chair, to get a result until after the election?
You'll see lots of results along the way.
Oh.
Yeah. In fact, I met with Stuart Chisholm from Evergreen yesterday over at Mulberry. We had a great talk for the half-hour meeting. It went an hour and a half, and the emphasis there was on just what Glenn has keenly pointed out: the engagement and bringing the right people to the table, and those who are interested in sitting down early There's architects in the community. As soon as that was brought to General Issues Committee, who called and said, you know, we've been active on this file A, file B. We want to make sure we're part of the conversation. And when I sat down with Stuart yesterday, you know, when this was initially talked about over a year ago with the city manager, myself, and some others, about maybe taking advantage of this opportunity because it all emanated out of the Hamilton Community Foundation, the first question I had was, well, wait a minute, we don't want any perception of duplicating studies or adding to engagement that's already, adding new engagement to engagement that already exists. And it was clear, and that was what Terry Cook was there as well from the Hamilton Community Foundation. The whole point of the exercise early is to bring those people that are already very much got a firm grasp on certain files, whether it's waterfront or Bart and Tiffany or James Street, James Mobility or other aspects. So I actually sat there and we started throwing names, and yours, both of you two, were on that list. So our two executive directors of the BIAs and guys like Bill Curran and others. So and more I know want to make sure they get in contact early. We got in contact with our new facilitator for participatory budgeting. There's some interest there as well to assist and facilitate, particularly as the ideas come in from the public. So, sorry, Kathy. I think she still has. Then Mary.
So, this is part of the planning process, though, of the entire area. It doesn't really address the issues of perception of safety and security, though, in the downtown.
It very well could, and that, you know, if that's the top of your list for the conversation, they're still putting together their work plan, and they're assessing what's the greater demands in terms of what are the public's interests, and how can we utilize our expertise in this not-for-profit planning group to move the ball, keep the momentum going, and in some ways accelerate, and sometimes and maybe even bring in new initiatives. So it could very well, and maybe when you get to the table with Stuart, which you will, you can suggest that.
Because Glenn, I would think that this one would also be part of the mandate, which was the security report that was paid for, I think, through your department a while before you got there, in terms of they paid for a consultant to come in and talk about safety and security issues, and there was like 60 or 70 recommendations that came through that report for that.
So it's, I think if I'm hearing the councilor right, I think we could make that assignment, we can shape that assignment to suit the needs of the various groups, and I think the voice of this group would be an important one to them.
There's also an opportunity, and I hadn't put it together, I know Mary's going to hit on this next, but there's an opportunity with their expertise to at least make the requests and initial sit-downs with these folks to actually consult for us and establish this terms of reference even. They do have expertise in these things for a strategic planning exercise. My understanding too, and Mary, I know I'm sure will speak to it, but a big part of this exercise is for us to, you know, reinforce the areas where we're strong, but also establish as a group mandates, maybe new mandates, and strengthen our abilities as a committee. So, and they can assist there too. That could be our number one request, and then from there, from those sit-downs and conversations, we find different projects that we can accelerate based on, number one, their pool of dough, which Glenn was instrumental last night. They made a motion on taking 150 away from the Ward 2 area rating capital reserve, and actually we found another source through some of his urban renewal efforts. And so that's a really good point, and it's something that I'm sure Evergreen folks, Evergreen/CityWorks/Hamilton Community Foundation/City of Hamilton would be happy to talk about. They're at this point now where they want to put a list together and work with people. So, Mary.
Mr. Chairman, on our city, Martinez and Terry had a conversation about Evergreen on Monday Night Show, and it was on again 2 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, so I watched it again. And I ended up sending Terry an email and suggested that at long last, long overdue, great to see that we're going forward. And he called me back and told me some of the great stuff that they were talking about. And when you take the very first charrette we did on downtown Hamilton, this is full speed ahead on the basics and fleshing all of them out. So it's really exciting stuff. Really exciting stuff. So terrific move on behalf of council and staff.
And to be able to publicly say as an elected official that we're leveraging $5 for every $1, you know, we throw in 150 and the result is
Too young for
650.
that.
Yeah, you're right.
The Young Foundation,
Yeah, the Young Foundation.
because that's where the dollars are coming from.
John?
Yeah, I watched the same thing, but I was smart enough to watch it, I think it was 5 o'clock.
What, in the morning?
No, the night before.
Oh, I watched it twice.
Yeah. But anyway, I
Those are the
believe,
times that they have.
I believe he indicated it was, they expected to be working it for 2 years. So, you know, we were talking about time. So it's and yet, you know, starting to work on it immediately.
Well, that's good.
It did sound tremendous and very, you know, quite deep.
It's very exciting.
And again, to emphasize, they're not in to reinvent the wheel. More studies, I think Councillor Collins may have spoke to this in committee. It's not even healthy to have a perception that here we go again, reinventing the wheel, more studies that's going to just prolong ongoing efforts. So that was good and reinforced yesterday when I met with Stuart as well. So Glenn has offered in his discussion that the timing may not be right, and on that specifically, given that we had a good tech chat about this the last time we met. I think maybe it's prudent that the committee deliberate specific to that, given that he has the CCS plans, the secondary plan that's soon to be concluded. And Kathy, do you not sit at that table, the downtown secondary plans
Yes.
study group? Okay. You did not offer what you may suggest as a good time, maybe the next term of council. Is that what you're?
Well, I think it's going to be at least that. Sorry, it will be definitely into the next term of council, because your term of council comes up at the end of October, November.
Right.
The Evergreen project will really just be gathering momentum and getting going, and the downtown secondary plan, as I understand, is scheduled to be wrapped up this fall. So I think your input to it will still happen, and then you'll see what are the deficiencies, what didn't get covered that you wanted covered, and then go back and say, okay, now we have a finite sort of breadth and how much we want studied and strategically looked at. So I think you're waiting for those two things to lead off and come to close to conclusion first.
Would we want to select a representative from this committee to, again, assist in reaching out and having an early meeting in the next few days or a week or so with Stuart and the Evergreen people, representing all of us as a Cleanliness and Security Task Force? I think it would be a healthy 45-hour conversation where
45 hours.
45 minutes.
Whoa, that's a good
2 hours.
That's worse
No
than the
one
council
has
meeting.
We went last night. Yeah, we went about that long last night. Maybe that's a great starting point, and then that member of the committee can report back to this committee and bring that message that, you know, we're strongly advocating for a new terms of reference, or at least we're contemplating and talking about a strategic plan. Here's what we do now. Here's some of the initiatives that through the Cleanliness and Security Task Force we've brought forward and has improved this area, that area, and let him spend some time making some suggestions as well. Again, strong partnership, easily early, my observation, and it wouldn't hurt, I think. So how do we feel about probably just starting that conversation with Stuart? And he could probably help us with, and his experts could help us with some identity issues, for lack of a better word, if we want. Yes, Glenn?
Just a staff suggestion, if I may,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman. As opposed to selecting a voice from this committee to meet with him, how about he comes and meets with the whole committee?
Oh, as a delegation, yeah.
As a
That's not a bad idea. How's that? Anybody want to move it? Kathy? Seconded by John. All in favor? Carried. Carried. So the next meeting, and I'll give you the contact info if you don't already have it. Okay. Thank you, Glenn. Any a motion to receive the idea? Move to receive John Hawker, seconded by Susie. All in favor? That is carried. Weed control measures. And these are sidewalk cracks in the downtown core. This has nothing to do with the marijuana stuff we were dealing with last week. Peter, thank you for coming back to committee.
Thanks for having me, Chair.
What have you to report, sir?
Short and sweet, weeds and sidewalks within residential and BIA areas are trimmed by the roads division. They use a string trimmer or weed whacker, as they're commonly referred to, and it is on a complaint basis only, or is requested by councillor. Horticulture is responsible for maintaining weeds and sucker growth on trees within the tree pits and sidewalk areas located in the BIAs. Suckers are cut back with hand loppers, and weeds are hand pulled or string trimmed, weed whacked twice per year or as requested. I did do a scan of 6 southwestern municipalities. 5 reported to have similar informal programs, so complaint basis only. The only one that reported to have a formal program for weeds and sidewalks was Niagara Falls, which we all know is a very highly, very big tourism area. And their program included trimming the weeds in paver stones or interlocking stones within the downtown area beneath home planter boxes, so pretty specific. So I think what I took away from the scan was that we seem to be consistent with nearly every other municipality in the area. And there was some, I think, a reference in the item from the last minutes about alternative methods. So historically, pesticide control methods were used almost in all the municipalities. This includes Hamilton. Prior to the enactment of the cosmetic pesticide ban amendment to the Pesticide Act in 2009. Since that time, various municipalities have tried alternate methods such as the propane torch, I think you mentioned at the previous meeting, Susie. Things like Aquicide, which is a kind of a steam kill. However, all the municipalities, including staff and parks that I spoke with, reported that those were ineffective or too costly. So that's pretty much the report.
Questions for Peter? I have one.
Yes, sir.
You take the chair. Sure. And so we're trying to put our best foot
Yes.
forward, as they say.
Yeah.
So, are we talking now about image? Downtown is a key focal point, obviously, with the games in 2015. And to the point on what you're speaking to today, is there a plan in place, or are you talking of putting a plan in place?
Well, certainly, if that's the direction we can do.
Because for now, what I'm hearing is, okay, we better be on our toes. Hopefully Hopper goes on a lot of his walks because it's based on complaints. And I know you're great at handling, answering to when we have concerns. But if that's the case, then maybe this committee needs to consider putting a team out on the streets during the events like Pan-Am or Junos, if weeds grow during Junos and that kind of thing. Or maybe this committee can take it one step further, particularly as it relates to around tourism activity. You mentioned the falls and what they just do it because it's such a popular spot. And certainly we will be for a few occasions in 2015. Maybe we should have you maybe report back on or give you direction. It doesn't even have to be a motion on what that conversation is shaping up to be from a public works perspective as it revolves around this issue. And maybe others, respecting image and cleanliness for the games. Cal?
Sure, a staff recommendation or suggestion. Maybe Peter wants to hook up with reps from the Pan Am committee because maybe they're already thinking along those lines of aesthetics in the downtown core and would want duplication. So maybe we can have a quick conversation.
Who's our contact between now and then? Who's our contact for those who are actively engaged in watching the weeds grow, as it were?
You can certainly let me know.
Directly, and then you'll send the crew out and they'll whack or do whatever they do. Mary?
I wish we could all think along the lines of why do we have to go overboard when there's a big event coming and our citizens have to put up with it every day? We should be at our best at all times, not just when the big company bus comes to town. So, I don't know if anybody else on the committee feels that way, but I think the citizens are entitled to clean, safe, and comfortable space. If we do it for our own, then we don't have to worry about the big costly expense when the visitors come to town. My thoughts.
It sounds like it's reactive. You know, the job will be done, we gotta call it in, like 5 other communities of the 60 looked at, but it's a good point. John?
I thought, is there some way of getting through to some of the businesses, the corporations, even the plazas? But I see a number of lots, empty lots, adjacent to businesses, and obviously owned by that business, that are god awful as far as weeds and overgrown grass, etc. Is there some way of, if we want to talk image, do they think image, or is it a who cares, we're not going to do anything unless you lean on us attitude?
Through the chair. That's the same with any private property in the city of Hamilton. It's under the yard maintenance bylaw, and we certainly will enforce any violations. We usually do it on a complaint basis, and if our staff are out there and they're in the area and they do find a violation and they see the neighboring property with the same violation or another violation, they will take the appropriate actions.
I mean, I guess that's what we got to live with. But it's too bad that some of these business folks don't have a warm fuzzy feeling for the city enough to
Sense of pride.
yeah. That's it. I mean, is there some way? And I don't know whether or not there can be a city, not necessarily a directive, but a city prompting.
Right.
I just had an idea, but to Mr. Hawker's point, could we use some of our funds to run a bit of a pride in your community, keep it clean campaign? Like, use the Spectator, use the social media, and with this committee being a driving force to it, so that we become more of a public engagement thing. And just as John had said, why don't people have pride in their property? Why don't you? Here's all it takes. And by the way, the smaller print, and here's what we will do. Here's the stick. The carrot is have pride, we all benefit. The stick is, and if you don't, municipal bylaw enforcement have the right to cut the weeds themselves and to add the cost of that to your tax bill. I'd suggest, you could do it cheaper than our own forces. Is there something like that that might be an interesting initiative coming out of this committee?
Through the chair, Emily does do education campaigns, and we do have one on the yard maintenance, and I am going to be doing a new video very, very soon. It was actually scheduled for yesterday, but got postponed, and we could shape that video to say, yard maintenance is not just for residential property owners, but businesses. We need you to step up. We're trying to get our city to have a really positive image, so we can slant the video more towards that theme than focusing on the residential properties. We can combine them both. We can start with that, and certainly if there's any other suggestions, but when we do issue an order for yard maintenance, we do put a little pamphlet there that says, all the stuff you can do to make your property look aesthetically pleasing, more aesthetically pleasing. We also do have a proactive team of officers that are just being recruited now, and if we can identify certain areas that we have concerns about, we can do blitzes in those areas to target, and once they get the message and they know we're out there watching, it's simple measures that they can take and should be taking to keep their properties looking nice.
Kathy?
Mr. Chair, I think that's a great initiative, and I would just sort of play on the fact that Pan Am is coming. The Junos are coming. 2015 is a really big year, and so perhaps we could play on the initiatives of all of these visitors coming. Because that made a big impact when we had the World Cycling Championships and everybody got so enthusiastic that we had all these visitors coming that it seemed to spark a bit of a spruce up even by the property
Absolutely.
owners and so on. So I think we could play on that. But I think part of that goal might be to identify the routes that Pan Am have identified as the corridors in the city that will be used by Pan Am visitors and people who are coming, either whether it's through the waterfront where they are hoping to hold their ceremonies, or downtown, or the Pan Am Stadium precinct, or so on. So there are certain areas that perhaps could be targeted by the city to take a real good scan through and try and identify key areas that need to be cleaned up before then.
Alan Kirkpatrick would be your transportation guy, and he's identified just this week the key routes. It's a very good point. Susie?
Would it make sense if Kelly's having a video done to do a mass social media with that when it's ready?
I can talk to our communications officer on distribution of that. I know it goes on Cable 14, and it's a YouTube video, so.
So if it's YouTube, we could link to it.
Absolutely, you can, yes. And then further to having not only the city take maybe a proactive on the Pan Am routes, maybe I would recommend back to our management that we use our proactive officers to do a proactive blitz on those routes as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Peter, out of this committee, sorry, John, go ahead.
No, it's, I agree to some extent with Kathy, but, to go along with Mary, we shouldn't need the Pan Am. We shouldn't need the Juno here. Give the city a kick in the butt, and the businesses a kick to have the pride to do it. It should be a continuous effort. And if this video is coming out soon, yes, let's blitz it everywhere we can. It's springtime coming up, the garbage is being shown. Maybe it's good, it's good timing. But then, let's clean up and let's keep it going, folks.
Okay, I'm with you. I mean, it'd be great year round. On those points from you and Mary, Peter, this committee, we've done, I think, some pretty good, we've created through this work some good initiatives. One of the things that stands out for me over 3 years was, and I can't remember whether it was Kelly or whomever on staff that went back, checked in on it, came back and said, yes, we could have our street cleaning staff address those poster boards, the poster kiosks.
Right.
So we added to their duties. It seems to have worked really well. Regularly, we have guys walking down with the broom and regularly, I can't remember what's preventing us from at least looking into the feasibility of adding a weed whacker on the back of those guys, since they're walking by these tall weeds anyway. Maybe we have the conversation about adding a little something to their hourly rate, which is not a big hourly rate to begin with. Compensate them for the additional workload. It's a little different than taking a few posters down that they see are dated. But I think that worked really well. We went out and said, can you do it? The crew directly responsible for street cleaning said, yeah, sure, we'll take care of your kiosk for you. It was a non-issue, much like the needles in the parks. And the Board of Health said, well, Public Works, we'll talk. I asked, can you talk to Public Works? They're out there cleaning the parks anyway, but up until that point, they said health hazard, we don't touch discarded needles. An educational piece and work with our Public Works employees found that it's safe to do, you just do it this way, and now our Public Works park maintenance people clean up discarded needles. Way less complaints since that initiative took place. I don't want to be the guy who keeps adding to workload, but if you're the guy with the broom and the dustpan going down the street on a regular basis, particularly in the spring, summer months, and you're walking past weeds that are this tall in our city sidewalks or at the curbs, what's preventing us from at least looking into saying, hey, you know what, give them, even if it's not an electrical or mechanical weed whacker or some form of equipment that slices it off at the roots, and pick it up like you would a piece of garbage. Does the committee think maybe we could at least ask that question?
Doesn't have to be every day.
No, it wouldn't be every day, right? But can you, when you report back to us on your Pan Am, can you also say, here's from a staffing standpoint, how that looks?
Will do.
Thanks, Peter. Anybody else? Appreciate your time. Thank you. Good conversation on this one. It is a pain. Down to a motion to receive the update. Moved by John, seconded by Kathy. All in favor? It's carried. General information and other business. We don't have another discussion. Do you have?
No.
Okay.
Well, just the keeping of pigeons report, but it was more for information.
Okay. That's 6.1. It's before us. Oh no, this is the survey, sorry. Subcommittee evaluation tool, it's a survey the clerk's office conducted to gather feedback about the city's subcommittees. If you've completed this survey, please return it to the committee clerk here today at the end of the meeting, or send it to her by April the 15th. Did everybody get a copy of that survey? You have copies?
Mr. Chair, I have a question about the survey.
Sure.
Was the committee established by following the criteria for the creation of advisory committees or task forces as outlined in Appendix 1 of the city's procedural bylaw 10-05?
How do you know the answer?
I don't know.
Yes, it was.
Take a moment, just have a quick look at it.
Yeah.
That's
I can send it out by email as well, and that would be, you can complete it that way too.
And if the committee includes citizens or they selected primarily on the basis of, council, I think, were the ones who selected the committee. General interest in the issue, specific, special knowledge or expertise in the subject matter, representative geographic areas.
clerk.
I think all three would apply to this.
All three?
Well, Kathy, your amendments were for, they would have been for discussion too, so I should say 5.3 would be the environmental scan, 5.4 will be the alleyway project update, 5.5 would be the enhanced service, and 5.6 would be the Gore Wall update. I just forgot that that would fall right there in the agenda. So as you're looking at the survey, 5.3, the environmental scan, Kathy?
Traditionally, this committee has scheduled, when the weather turns a little nicer, to schedule a walk with many of the city departments like bylaw and police and public works and various other city departments that can walk with us on a specific route to determine if there is any major things that we could identify as part of the work of the committee in terms of identifying cleanliness and security issues in downtown core. So I would strongly recommend that we do that sometime in May, so that we can identify and perhaps have a discussion at our next meeting. What traditionally we do is Susie and I walk with the group and with all of the rest of the committee as well to identify some of the issues that are too big for us as BIA to be able to identify, or as part of the whole determination of the downtown. We can identify some of the common issues that are prevalent in most of the areas. So if we could schedule that, I think the last time we did it was sort of a 4 o'clock-ish time frame, so it seems to work for us. It takes a couple of hours, though.
Peter, you're up for a walk?
I love walking
And riding.
and riding. Through you respectfully, we might want to have a Pan Am rep piggybacking on.
Good idea. I'm just writing down the list of who to invite to give to Lori. Bylaw, Kelly, urban renewal, one or Lisa or you or both. Police, Scott, you can get somebody or you'll join us.
Yeah. For a couple.
Pan Am is a great suggestion. Excellent suggestion there. Any other departments that we can brainstorm right now to invite on this walkabout? And then Lori can establish the date and obviously contact everybody and work out.
What areas were you thinking?
Just the entire downtown, like from, like right down to James. Like we could make a big circle from James to, well, yeah.
Do,
Yep.
through the chair,
Yeah.
do we assume that the BIA would represent the heritage factor? Is there someone that,
Property standards, and we can invite a heritage planner. Yep, that's a good idea. Well, Kelly, I assume property standards is going to be here.
I actually might even think it might be special because they can enforce all of the bylaws. But I will work it out, Councillor, that we all have the right back there.
Yeah, maybe we can get the heritage staff on the route that we walk, identify the last night's approved 1,000 or so buildings of historical or heritage interest. Mary?
Sometimes if we had a need, we would get someone from the Department of Health. But that was only if we had a specific issue we wanted to address.
You know what, wouldn't hurt to have them because they may be able to tell us, you know what, we found this is, there's a spot between Lister and the variety store. There's other businesses coming, but that little area where the building collapsed, I know we've had some issues there and they can talk to us as we
Next
walk.
big campsite.
Yeah. Guy next door is doing a great project, but there's this issue with encroachment on a fire escape that's become the big stumbling block. It's so crazy. It's always been there, but anyway. Anybody else can think of a department we should contact?
Not a department, Councillor, but Jeans North does have the Merchants Association. They haven't quite seen the benefits of a BIA yet, but they do have a Merchants Association. Perhaps if we can entice someone representing that organization to join us, they can see the benefits of working with us.
Okay. Very good.
And that was for May, was the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Want Glenn to start with the alleyway project update, item 5.4, I believe this would be.
Actually, it'll be Peter giving the update.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he's got a great.
Well, thanks to Glenn's urban renewal funding, we're able to kind of get underway with the alleyway project, and I've been in pretty constant discussions with Kathy and Susie, who I believe both hired the staff, and we're moving forward with a public meeting, kickoff meeting in May. Exact date, Susie? Chair?
As we work out the date, just remind the committee it's the alleyway
Oh, yes.
north of King.
It's the alleyway north of King between Houston and Wellington, so it does encompass the downtown Hamilton and International Village VIAs. And we will be establishing some community art projects, doing some enhanced sweeping and cleaning. The alleyway lighting replacements are imminent. All the approvals are in place, so we're just waiting for the goes in. And it will be a really big focus on waste strategy. So we're all going to work together to develop a waste strategy to kind of alleviate some of the, it seemed to be the key issue both for city staff and the VIAs. So we look forward to kind of trying some stuff out. It is a pilot, so I think we'll all learn lots.
And Glenn, thanks for the dough. I think this is a significant and important project. Yep.
I was going to say the launch is on May 6th from 6 till 8 at the freeway. We're calling the project Up Your Alley.
Yeah, I forgot.
I like that.
That's great.
Any other questions for Peter regarding the alleyway project? It'd be great to see a good representative group from this committee on May the 6th. At what time, Susie? Sorry?
6 till 8 at the freeway. May 6th.
May 6th.
Could that be sent out to all of us?
Do you want to send that out?
Sure, I could send it to Lori, and maybe we can include it in the minutes. And certainly I'll copy you, I'll send it to the calendar later today.
Enhanced, oh, sorry, John, on this.
Kristen, this is a pilot. How long is the pilot going on?
Through you, Chair, it goes, well, from now to November. We're hoping to have all the final reporting done by December, January.
You know what I just thought? Evergreen, City Works. Maybe bring them to your next meeting. you've done a lot of work, they're not gonna come in and
Yes.
change the plan, but they might offer a bit of dough. Quick wins are a big part, like stuff that they can show
Right.
and change for the better. You know, there is money there, so maybe that money can become beneficial, whether they sponsor some recycling centers in that alley or something that they could offer that helps with the aesthetics. Evergreen. So that might be a good idea for the next meeting to reach out to Stuart.
Good idea.
Up your alley, and you said freeway? Okay. So enhanced service, Kathy.
This committee has always been conscious of the fact that if there is a need to identify some issues with respect to the cleanliness of the downtown core, that is over and above what is currently done. And I think we've already just identified that in terms of the weeding in sidewalk cracks and so on, to look at ways that the budget either could be stretched as to what currently is being done or to enhance through this process. It's probably too late to do anything for 2014. And that therefore is the rub, because that expresses, in my mind, a bit of disappointment that this committee could not have met through the fall and winter in order to identify some of the things that could have been brought forward as enhancements for the 2014 budget. So going forward, I would strongly recommend that we put this item on the agenda, and that there is a framework of enhancements that were approved back in the former life of this committee that maybe should be reviewed and see where we sit with some of those enhancements. Have they been implemented, and are they working, and going forward to work towards 2015, which again, with all of the events that are happening in 2015, would be a good exercise for this committee to do.
That's a good idea. Who carries out that, clerk, would you want a
Again,
review of?
this, again, Mr. Chair, was part of the discussions around the evaluation. We used to have someone through Glenn's office that was identified as the key person that would do that kind of work and bring all of the recommendations together as part of the discussion. I don't know whether that's still possible through Glenn's office or whether it needs to be through Peter's office, but it's much more than just public works. It's a lot of departments that have to be
Glenn?
discussed.
I don't recall it, Kathy's predate me?
Yeah.
Lisa, do you?
2008, 2009.
And probably Hazel was doing
Yeah,
that.
she was.
Can we check with Hazel?
We'll check and see if there's a way to revive that.
She may still have, I mean, I have a lot of the documentation, but I'm sure that she
Oh,
probably.
the documentation will be on file, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It sounds like Kathy's being patient enough that we can offer a bit of time, but do it right and then be ready in 2015. Anybody else on enhancements? Yes.
Some of those enhancements also come out of the walkabout.
Yes.
That's where a lot of them, which there's been, just city staff saying, well, that's out of the budget. Okay, maybe we should need to improve the lighting for this area, put it in the budget for 2015.
Right.
That's where a lot of it starts from.
And I think conversely, to recognize, Peter, if you could help work with Hazel, if it is Hazel or somebody else, from Urban Renewal, just to Scott's point, put a price point next to that, those initiatives that we brought forward just through good committee work, like, for example, the kiosk, and what value we have from that necessarily wasn't budgeted for, but we managed to achieve through some creative staffing and thinking. Yes, Scott?
And so I follow Kathy's point, we hadn't had successes because of that. The alleyway project is one of them that was identified several years ago. The lighting downtown was identified several years ago.
Yeah.
The poster kiosk was something, so I want to say, like Kathy says, it'd be nice to actually see some of the successes we have, right, and then identify new going forward.
Yeah, I think we even enhanced the street, this
Yes.
power watching and
Right?
stuff.
Yeah.
So identify that stuff, but
Social media.
social navigator's huge. That's a biggie.
And snow removal was part of that too.
So we had a lot of successes.
Yes, Glenn?
If I might add to that, Councillor Dunn, Kathy's going to be going on that vein of, budgeting in advance, because we're going to start into the 2015 budgeting very soon.
Of course.
One thing that my department has to review this year and bring back to council is the two incentives that we brought in for just a limited life, 3 years in the downtown core. One is the GORE program for $50,000 matching grant, and the other is what I call facade light, the non-BIA but still downtown CIPA, $50. They're scheduled to expire this year. I would appreciate input from this committee perhaps on whether that's okay, or whether you would suggest something else. Do we need to extend them a year? Do we need to make them permanent? But absent any intervention, those two programs will expire at the end of this year. This is the third year for them.
Through the chair to Glenn. Glenn, is there any way we can get data on the specific areas that have taken advantage of those programs so
Absolutely.
that we can evaluate how it has affected the cityscape and
I can put them all in, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Terry. I can put them all in a map of the downtown, and I can give you details of each one. What was spent and what it was for, and then you could take a look. And the idea is, are we there? Some of it comes from our walkabout as well. And as you know, because you have the inside information, and Kathy, there's a whole bunch that are planned for this year. People are planning on it. I'll advise you of those as well, what's still to come. And then it's a bit of a qualitative decision on, is that enough? Do we need to do more, or are we happy with what that program achieved? And if not, then I need to look at the dollars with the overall envelope given for urban renewal and see if that needs to be extended or changed. Open to all that input, by the way.
Or enhanced.
Or enhanced, yes. That's always a tough one, but
Through you, Mr. Chair. Glenn, how many of those programs that started off being for the downtown incentives got expanded to other BIAs and other areas in the city?
all of them.
All of them.
As of 2013, we rolled them out to all the other community downtowns and BIAs. Other than this GORE program, which is exclusive to any property facing onto GORE. And part of that was in response to getting us a giant step forward, if we could, in preparation for the Pan Am, and just realizing it needed to be done. And this one with the facade light. That's only offered in the downtown CIPA. That's not offered elsewhere. So that's what I'm wondering about. Is it appropriate to go to other areas? Is it appropriate to extend it? What is the thought of this group?
Anybody else? Kaylee?
Through the chair, I just wanted the committee to know that there is a report going forward in the near future on the evaluation of the poster kiosk sleeve pilot project. So that will be out fairly soon.
And through participatory budgeting, I guess it's just a good time to mention that there's an enhancement on kiosks in the participatory budgeting, and there's an enhancement on no smoking signs in parks. Every park's going to have sufficient signage. And as it relates to cleanliness and security, the $250K for an alleyway project, Listerine Alley. John?
Okay, question to the chair. As far as the participatory budgeting is concerned, what wards are they? Just strictly two.
Yeah.
Councilor, you may want to mention to the group the initiative you and I have discussed. And
Oh, yeah.
jointly the bike racks.
You want me to get all the glory on that? It was your idea. I'll be more than happy to allow you to announce it officially. It's great news.
It's a joint announcement. How about
Okay.
that? So our thought was that we're bringing in the social bike program this year, and with it comes stands that you park the bike back in when you're finished with it. However, that doesn't necessarily help you when you're using that bike to go to a merchant's place of business to buy something and there's no bike racks there. So through some of the an identification of a project that didn't need all its budget, we're looking to reallocate $100,000 from that project to bike racks, and the councillor has kindly enhanced that to $120,000 using $20,000 of his budget. So it's not just for the downtown. We're going to offer this to all the BIAs and community centres, sort of on a pro rata basis, saying I look to the BIAs to help me determine how we split that up. But that would make for, and again, we'll look to our partners. We're meeting this afternoon with Public Works to say, how can we implement this quickly, so they get done this year. And so the bike racks have some creative aspect to them as well. And should there be a cost sharing with the property owners, those things are still to be worked out. But I think it'll greatly enhance the number of places for people to park a bike once they're on them. And with things like the Canon bike lanes and all the other enhancements that are being made to biking, I think that's the next logical step, is a place to park the bikes. And it will impact on cleanliness and security, because you've now got something else on that side that we have to be conscious of, and not constricting the space for people to walk or have a tripping hazard. But I think it will help towards the objectives of what you're looking for.
With the 20K allotted to downtown, we're taking care of all the downtowns, but have enhanced it by 20K. We could also have that discussion on bike parking, or like we do in front of bike hounds, actually utilize the road instead of the sidewalk, but we'll have those discussions. Yes?
Susan and I, Mr. Chair, were part of the discussions. This is so perfect timing, Glenn, because the Ontario by Bike program is coming, has an initiative that enhances the connections of bike paths and routes through Hamilton. They are announcing in 2015 an opening of a Hamburg loop that will, and Councillor Collins might even know, it goes in through Confederation Park and over in Burlington, but it is trying to encourage businesses to become more bike friendly. They have to have bike repair kits and be registered online so that they will pop up on a map that is part of this Hamburg loop that's going to be launched in 2015. So this is really great timing, because the bike racks would be an enhancement that would allow that business or that restaurant or that hotel to be more user-friendly if they had bike racks out in front of their premises. So it's perfect timing for that. And if we can get more of the bike racks into the downtown core, the loop comes in right through International Village, right up Ferguson, connects to all the hotels downtown, so that's perfect timing. Thank you very much, Glenn. That's awesome.
Bike racks I'm finding International Village is a great example. We managed to find one in storage for the Cafe Orange strip, that wonderful little strip there as you enter the village. I know Gameopolis wants one. Others along James have been asking for a while, as well as recycling bins, which is another story for some other time. But maybe, given what we've just mentioned, we could use it as a bit of leverage. You want a bike rack, you need a bike repair kit in your shop, and we want you to register on this website. And so we can show that...
It doesn't necessarily have to be on every business, this bike repair kit. It could just be something that's maybe one block or something. Find it. This is the location where a bike repair kit is. And so they have to have bike brochures and bike information at that particular business. And that's the bike people are quite prepared through Daryl Bender's office here in the city to distribute bike route maps and so on. So it's quite an initiative through the city to work on that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be totally compliant, but the company itself or the Ontario Bike Association are very keen to get as many registrants on that map as possible.
Excellent. Terry, and then...
Through the chair, I was just wondering if there's any kind of initiative that could be, I don't know the bike rack specifically, but some kind of a chip or something where somebody could take their iPhone and then find out where the businesses are located, businesses and restaurants located in that, a certain square footage of that bike rack.
Joey?
For advertising purposes?
You're referring to NFC, I believe, near-field communication. That's actually something that probably is part of the city's open data initiative. It could be sent over to the open data office to see if the city can provide that information in open format that it already has, and a little bit of seed money that I can't speak on behalf of Open Hamilton without first going through our board, but it's something that Open Hamilton could assist with funding as well. And I think our membership would be very supportive of.
There might even be an initiative for some advertising revenue for businesses to kick in some money towards that in order to be part of the scheme.
Also, adding to that, Terry, what we could do is add it to the BIA app. So you've got a great app now that lets you say, where am I and where are the restaurants or the other businesses around here? We get added as another field. Where are the bike racks around here? So when you're making a plan for a journey to a BIA, you know where you're going to stop. Now you can also plan where you're going to park your bike. And I can certainly look at funding that, adding it to the BIA app.
Sounds like we,
And tourism's out too.
And tourism's after.
Yeah.
Sure.
how about a brief subcommittee that you can chair and report back to? Working with
I am
Joe.
not a social media person.
No, but Joe is. Joe will volunteer half hour.
I'd be more than happy, we actually work in the same office space for her and I to connect and bring back a motion for the next meeting of this committee.
So why don't we coordinate then, and Glenn and I can take a walk over to Seaworks and to coordinate a half hour, 45 minutes, and figure out how we can go forward on this. It sounds like another good conversation turning into an action item from our safety and security task force. Yes?
I just had one thing.
Thanks, Terry.
We may want to speak to Barton Village BIA. I know they're trying to undergo a big AODA, the most accessible BIA in North America kind of thing. And I know that one of their businesses has developed a product for signage that you could put on the bike racks and all that information would come up. So just wanted to know that. And then my second point is, when you said creative bike racks, could you expand on that?
So something that is more artistically designed, right? So same as we did the bench competition, right? Came up with some things that are pretty cool for benches. Can we do the same thing with bike racks? And there already are some around the city. Some look like a bike. They're just not the regular old black thing, and not just the loop on a pole. And the thought is not to make the cost exorbitant high, but pay a little bit more and get something that enhances the area visual. And maybe it's different in an historic area. You know, Ancaster might choose to use something different than International Village. You know, but if we, working with Public Works, identify some design standards, some styles that are available in the catalog, and we buy in bulk, we may be able to make it quite a unique thing that's part of the street furniture.
Would you be able to consult with the BIAs on that?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Excellent. 5, 6, Gorewall, update, very briefly. So we all know that on December 19th, Council designated the buildings in question in Gore as, after a year of good, amicable discussion, turned to different compromises, but none that were etched in stone. And unanimously, council said, okay, we need to designate for fear of demolition. One permit was going to run out in January. It was the last meeting before that permit would run out, and the other one soon after. Glenn was at the table for a lot of those meetings, and other senior city staff, their legal, their representatives. It seemed that each meeting wound up with a way forward. We'd get our marching orders and come back a month or two later with another meeting that says, here, we made it work. Good examples are where Glenn Norton from Urban Renewal, brought forward. We literally moved motions as a council as we tried to work out this compromise. And one that really should be highlighted was when we changed our incentive program as it relates to designated heritage property from deed to address, and essentially made it possible for $250K that they would have been eligible for, give or take, to exceed $1 million of incentive that they would have been eligible for. Another example of where we went away and we did it, came back, there appeared to be some satisfaction around the table. Go on out, Jason, and tell the world that, this looks good. I'm paraphrasing. So anything I did say publicly was the result of a compromised discussion. But then the game would change again a month or two later, and so we got to the point where it's been a year, and it was very clear the message from the community, the concern as it relates to this very heart, the very center of our city, that we couldn't just, as a council representing all those folks who had those concerns, not take some kind of action. We designated. We still think, and I've heard not long ago that this group wanted to meet again with Steve Robichaud, which is great, but we heard not long ago that meeting is going to occur, And I'm not sure I haven't been invited to it, that's fine. If I am, I will definitely be there, and I'll drop appointments if need be. Regardless of that, we're at a stage here where we still think it can work. There's a lot of folks that I think maybe just need to convince, though we tried for a year, that Mr. Blanchard and his group can certainly make some money here. They can make this, at the very least, facade preservation work happen, and as a result, watch as people like Feswick and others, Seedworks, pretty much full office right now, can charge rents that make it profitable, because people want to be attached to that kind of project and want to locate their smaller or medium-sized businesses in areas of character and in buildings of character. So hopefully, enough people like Feswick and others in the community have had those sidebar conversations. Certainly we spent a lot of time as staff, and myself as a councillor, in trying to find a compromise, and certainly along the way, whenever we announced we found a compromise, it was vetted through both sides, and it just kept changing, and so this designation happened. So where are we now? Certainly where it's a concern to, or at least a relevant agenda item for the downtown BIA. They received after the designation, soon after the new year, property standards gave them a few orders to comply. We know it's not a pretty site, and we also had, I was through the BIA that Kathy and I had some discussions with respect to the wall, the fencing around there, and that, you're designated now, the fencing needs to come down. And with that, you need to patch some holes and pretty up the facades, regardless of the fact that, and I believe, Joe, you might be able to help me here, I believe it's mid-June. There's two things they're protesting, they're challenging. The property standards orders, and that's mid-May. They're going to go before the property standards subcommittee. That's a group representing the city made up of citizens and others. Who they want to appeal these property standards orders to, right, Kelly, mid-May?
That's right.
And then I think it's mid-June that they're appealing the actual designation as well to the
Ontario Heritage Trust.
Ontario Heritage Trust. That date sound right, Joe?
Yeah, the property standards is the second Tuesday of May, I believe. If my memory is correct, it's the second Tuesday usually. And then, yeah, the Ontario Heritage Trust will be soon thereafter.
Right. So, fair enough. Again, heard from our guy, our director of planning, that they had reached out last week, which to sit down at a table again with staff anyway. I thought that was somewhat encouraging. Hopefully there's something that comes of that. Maybe they've figured something out. Or they're inspired by other people who have taken the time to enhance facades and buildings and make it a go from a business standpoint. So we'll see. I'll continue to update the group on this wherever and whenever possible. And other than that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer whatever I can. Yes, Kathy?
Mr. Chair, were they receptive to even embellishing the facade with that fabric that we talked about in terms of covering up the disgusting looking mess for the Ontario BIA conference coming up at the end of April?
Yes, I haven't received any contact. I've tried to reach out and I haven't, unfortunately, received any response. So I love the idea, as you know, and hopefully somebody can get the word out to them on that. It's not a bad one. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what is the penalty if that building should suddenly fall down over a weekend, those buildings?
That's such as Balfour, or?
The engineering report, I don't think there's any concern to that end, but good question.
Through the chair, we do have a vacant building officer assigned to that building, and they do routinely check and monitor for violations, and if they felt that the building was compromised, they certainly would contact building services to come in and have a look.
We've lost some good buildings with them on a Christmas weekend, it suddenly disappeared. So that's
Century?
that's why I asked that question.
It's a good question.
No, building was fine, just
Oh, Councillor Collins.
Yeah, I went through that on the Mead Street, the Dines, and our staff pursued charges And through the courts, I believe the fine for the Dines was 25,000, which in the grand scheme of things,
Chump change.
Millions made by that property.
which makes its way through the court system essentially, after the charge is laid.
Yeah.
It's not a city levy or fine, it's through the courts.
Okay, let's move on. So 6.1 is survey. We did that. If you completed the survey, you can give it to Lori before we're through. 6.2 is respecting the keeping of pigeons in urban areas. This report has been added to our agenda for information and for members of the task force. In short, if you don't mind, folks, I can just tell you that we're not allowing pigeons to run amok or fly amok or create a mess. We maintain that as it relates to our new responsible animal ownership bylaw. We did have a really thorough presentation, delegation, and planning committee, of which both Councillor Collins and I sit on, from people from the Canadian Racing Pigeon Union. And they made a strong fight for their historic club and said how much this bylaw would be a detriment in the years ahead if we were to ban pigeons altogether. And so with the Canadian Pigeon Fanciers Association and the Canadian Racing Pigeon Union, our staff went away and did some good work, I think. And if you do see pigeons in Gore Park, make sure they got a little tag around their ankle, and it identifies to all of us that they're actually part of this.
They're a
club.
union pigeon.
They're union pigeons. Yeah. Yeah, it's something you can look for. I'm sure not all pigeons will have ankle wear or bling. Yes,
So if
Susan?
there are pigeons wreaking havoc on main streets because they're up in the buildings, how do we handle that?
I guess you call bylaw, right?
And that falls under this?
Well, yeah, it falls under, well, there's one that falls under property standards depending on where it's housed, and if it's being, if they're being fed and they're creating a nuisance, it falls under the feeding of the wildlife bylaw.
Because it's a big issue in my BIA, so just, you're trying to walk through a door and they're dropping on you, it's disgusting. So I would just report it to you guys then?
Yes, we will
Because in the past, I
investigate.
was told there was nothing that could be done, so.
Well, it is really difficult to, if the building is open and the pigeons are getting into the building. I'm sorry about that, but it's very difficult for us to stop them from flying around or perching and, you know, if people are feeding them and it's causing problems and there's accumulation of feces, we can do something about it.
Because that's the problem.
Mayor?
When we redid the Wright House building into Park Place, and the building that it is now, we had that issue because we had wide ledges. So it became quite the lunchtime entertainment to actually watch the pigeons, because we treated the ledges, we put this, it was some sort of a glue thing that went across, not glue, but once the pigeons sat on it, it got very warm. So, you know, they'd have, the only issue we had was feathers would tend to stick to it, so we had to clean the feathers off. So they used to all be on the old Kresge building next door. So something would happen and make a noise in the park or something, and they'd all swoop up, come across, and then sit on the ledges, and then you watch all kind of, we had a cafe on the inside of those windows, and people used to book seats at the windows so they could watch the games of the pigeons on the pot.
I remember years before I was a councillor, I was cutting a ribbon with Mayor Bob Morrow. And it was when the peregrines first started hanging around downtown. And Mayor Bob Morrow was at the mic, I'm not kidding. And 3 feet above his head, a pigeon flies, and from the other direction comes a peregrine, snatches it in the air, Bob, oh! And the whole place just went nuts. We just started, and it flew off with the meal for the day. I thought it was a natural way of taking care of the pigeon problem.
That's right.
Kathy?
Mr. Chairman, this is a common discussion I've had with maintenance and people from Public Works and Kelly from bylaw about the pigeon feeding in Gore Park. There are small, very, very small signs about the fines to feed pigeons in the park that people either do not see or ignore. And so in Gore Park, there is constant feeding of the pigeons. So I'm wondering if there's a way to improve the signage in Gore Park and many of the other parks that are in the downtown core with signage that will encourage people not to feed them because the fine is so large.
Kelly?
I'm not sure on the signage, I'm gonna take my glasses off, can see. I'm not sure on the signage piece of it. It's certainly something that we can talk to Public Works or Parks about.
The feces that are on the sidewalks in Gore Park, every day of the summer, we have to clean that off with power washing. It's so bad.
Can you report back to this committee next time out, Cal, on enforcement statistics? How are we doing on, how many people have been fined if it's happening on a daily basis? Are we successful in our enforcement? Unless, Raston, you're booking people and putting them in the...
I'll look into what we're doing with it. I don't think we've been issuing too many feeding pigeons.
No.
But
Well, get to work.
Yeah, we could.
Anybody else? Any other outstanding business that maybe are top of mind? Thank you. I'll go hear from Scott Baskin. He hasn't said much this meeting, and he may have a police update. Yes,
You want
Scott?
to do something?
Yeah, well, whatever you have. You don't have to go nuts.
I'll be really quick. Okay, update on the Social Navigator program. The funding for the Social Navigator program from Glenn's section, we kept it going for the last year and a half, ends on Saturday. EMS has taken the ball and will continue to fund it pretty well to the end of the year. So there will be no interruption in the Social Navigator program. Also, we received a grant last year for $50,000 to hire a master's student who we've done it through the Wesley Center who will do the, well, it's not a student, she was a social worker who actually does the follow-up. What Pat's been very good at doing is connecting people, but we need to keep the agencies accountable. And she's actually will do more of this, the follow-up and seeing what's happening long-term where these people go. It's a very valuable piece to the program. And it also will help with the evaluation because this all goes for community services at the end of the year. So she's been quite valuable. She's actually started in the end of January, and we have her for a full year too. So everything seems to be working together. The other part of that grant was we had an officer working with Pat, Kevin Murphy, but he also walks up and down King Street. We had his funding is actually coming to an end, so I'm trying to scramble to get somebody else to continue to do that day foot patrol up and down King Street, because I think it has proved it's quite valuable. Okay, so I'm working on that one for you.
What's the timeline there?
Well, Kevin, we still got it for another month, so I'm working on stuff to get somebody else in.
Excellent.
Okay. Talking about grants, we are submitting a grant for an officer and bylaw to work on the Hess Village. We put this grant in last year. We weren't successful, so we're going to try it again. The grant will focus on enforcement, education, and environment, which means the bylaw and the police officer will do enforcement, but they also want to work on educating the bars and the patrons. There might be a diversion program for patrons that are disunruly and things like that. And we'll also look at the environment if we need to, create taxi stands, things like that, to, solve some of the issues at Hess Village. So there'll be a follow-up on that. On the auxiliary front, I'd like to report that we average over 400 hours of auxiliaries working with Action now. They're all bike trained. We've enhanced the auxiliary program. We continue to get excellent young auxiliary officers. So there's a lot more visibility in the downtown with the auxiliary officers now. We're getting at least one a shift anyways. So and that doesn't cost our budget anything. CCTV, we are now averaging well over 200 hours with people monitoring the CCTV cameras, and that continues to go up. We have this combination of auxiliary officers and the people who are volunteers from our Crime Prevention Center. And we continue to train more. They're finding it very rewarding, and it's almost all day shifts are covering. We want to make it mandatory that we'll have people covering weekends, nights for Hess Village, because what I eventually want to do is start filming some of the disturbances, so I can actually bring them back here, because I think sometimes we tell you what goes on, the picture's worth 1,000 words. But actually, all right, so that's been a real success story. Another mounted, we've moved to Ancaster now. It has reduced our travel time, but the biggest advantage now with Ancaster is we have a barn manager, which has freed up one of our police officers who was spending a lot of time doing administrative stuff as opposed to doing patrols. And even yesterday, I can actually say we had 3 horses in the downtown area, and they all separated and took different BIAs. You know, one did Locke Street, King West, one did James Street in Barton, and one did International and downtown. So we had the ability, so there's lots of visibility. Operational, we have to turn down a lot of requests on weekends to go to schools or parades because they're still focused for the downtown entertainment districts and the bars areas on the weekends. We have to make sure they're operational. Waterloo has just canceled their mounted unit, and one of their issues was they did not focus on maintaining to be operational. You cannot create a mounted unit that is ceremonial.
No.
Right? And we've already said we have 5 horses, and when it says being downtown during the day shifts or the BIAs is very operational because it really does enhance public safety and visibility. Okay. That being said, crime stats are starting to come in, and I'm pleased to say this will be presented to the Police Service Board in May. But once again, the crime stats in downtown continue to fall, or they've had dramatic decreases since the strategy has occurred, and we haven't seen it go back up. Violent crime is down, break-and enters. That's the number of entries, car thefts and break-and enters to cars in the downtown area are minimal. Considering the thousands of cars that are parked down here a day, we have, you know, I think it's like 20 some cars that are broken into. I mean, it's an incredible number for when you look at what you have. I think the funds section, we made a presentation actually to McMaster last month. We were looking at putting a downtown grad residence, but they weren't too sure, you know, it's a safe spot to go. After we did the kind of presentation, they're kind of going, yeah, this actually is good. You know, once again, it does the perception of crime once again. And finally, we've got the new crime prevention center is actually open up on Barton Street in the Barton Street BIA area, which works really well. We do a lot of. But for the BIAs, we actually have a lot of crime prevention information. We'll actually, if your businesses, they can come in there. We can actually give them, robbery prevention, homes or business security, and there's a whole bunch of working displays there. So if you want to hold one of your meetings there, we will host it and do crime prevention training with that too. And finally, our auxiliaries are also trained now in doing business audits. So they're proactively going into BIA areas, and they'll be in here, and they walk into the business. If you wait for people to call you to do the audit, they will never do it. We go in, it's something like a fire inspection. They go through, they tell you how to improve your safes, your doors, your windows, but they also will teach you how to upgrade. Most people don't know how their CCTV internal systems work. We actually work with them, get all the information, let them know what they need to do, then they give them a report. Unlike the fire inspection, it's only voluntary. There's no follow-up fine if you don't choose to do something, but it's been very well received by the owners because it only takes half an hour and, you know, it does cost them anything. Okay, there's your police report.
A question to Scott, other than what you've spoken of. How is the progress of control and reports and studies regarding the scooters? Because, you know, bluntly, I'm on Robinson, and I had a wild guy, 60 plus, but obviously perfectly fit, but growing a bat out of the hell a long way. I don't think there's been no one. I've got a buddy of mine in Toronto who's calling Hamilton the Scooter City. And then this is the common chat around here. I swear I don't know whether or not the doctors did a take from the scooter stores, but it is a problem. It's a problem about speed. It's a problem about off and on sidewalks. And is there any enforcement?
You want to start?
Yeah, you want to start or you
No,
want
you
to
go for it.
Okay, this question has come up before, and I did a little bit of research into it, and scooters don't need to be licensed.
Right.
The Ministry of Transportation, having said that, it's up to a municipality to determine where scooters can and can't be. And it's up to the Ministry of Transportation, who regularly looks at this to determine when a scooter needs to become a licensed vehicle. So enforcement is very, very difficult. We need to also respect that there are persons with disabilities out there that need these vehicles to go around. And so far, we haven't found the vehicles operating in the city are above and beyond what's determined as a non-licensed motor vehicle.
And there are no governors on these things, as far as speed is concerned.
As Kelly said to Richard, we're really limited on enforcement. Yeah. We're doing a good job with the bicycles on the sidewalks and making them. See, we have power with those.
They only operate at a certain speed, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact speed, but once it goes over that certain speed, that's when the ministry gets involved and deems them as no longer a scooter, but a motorized vehicle requiring a license.
It's still too fast for a second.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, Chad.
Scott, do we have stats for the CCTV cameras in terms of before and after stats after they've been installed in certain areas? And is there an average, and I guess every street's different where they're located, but is there, do we have statistics that illustrate from a crime prevention perspective how they've helped, and then even from, I don't know how it works in terms of real time, or someone seeing something in progress and the call goes out and somebody's responding, or whether it's just used after the fact. So are there any stats there that might help us understand whether there's merit in making additional investments into that program in hotspot areas?
Yes, I can actually gather stats for you. You see, the CCTV cameras have been pretty well with us since the early 2000s. And prior to that, they were monitored, occasionally would probably be the best way to say it. I can actually give you stats now, since we've started to monitor them more vigorously, the number of arrests or incidents that have been reported to the officers each month. I can give you a comparison of crime between the areas prior to the monitoring that. But I'll tell you, most of the differences that you're seeing in the downtown area are the CCTV cameras are a part, but it's mostly, I think the action strategy has been, there's other variables in there. Right? Do we have, I don't know if we have too many public perception surveys. I'll have to go through the survey that we did in 2007 with the consultant then. But I might be able to dig out something for you, because I have lots of that stuff in there.
Okay. Lisa? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I wonder for the next meeting, if I could ask a couple of items to put on the agenda, and that's the signage in downtown, and also the cigarette butt campaign. There's going to be a new launch about identification of where all of the cigarette butt holders are going to be in the spring, and I know that there's some new things happening around that, so I wonder if we could have an update on that from whoever that might be. And also, I'm wondering about parking lot lighting standards. We seem to have a lot of private property parking lots that are not lit properly, and so I'm wondering if there's a way of being able to identify those.
I know we have an update now for that. Kelly?
Through the chair. For private property parking lots, it can be enforced under the property standards bylaw. Yes, so once a complaint made, we will send an officer out, and they will make sure that the light bulbs are replaced and that there's safe passage for pedestrian users. Yeah.
Terry or Mary? I can't remember which. Terry.
I have a couple items. One generates back to the last meeting we had regarding the Community Correctional Center on York. There was supposed to be a meeting set up with some people from the federal government. 6 months later, where are we at with that?
Yeah, so they did come and report tonight. Did we talk about them coming in and reporting? So they did follow up on the motion where we requested that representatives from the CC from the facility come and address GIC. They did. They hinted very, very strongly at having some good news for us this spring, 2014, in relocating the facility. It received some pretty good press at the time, but we just await that date where they're going to report back. If we could use as a measuring stick the way they adhered to and acquiesced to our request, I have to say I have every confidence that they'll be coming soon to GIC to tell us how they're managing to do this. But there was a lot of positivity, let's say, going around the committee following that announcement. Some good questions, and the prevailing theme was it's getting moved.
And further to that, in terms of that, I know that there was money that was allocated from the federal government for a police officer for that facility. So I guess once that facility is gone, we're not going to have the funding for a police officer. So what's that?
I guess you would restaff, reallocate that position.
And that was, I believe it's patrol, it was a probation or patrol type officer. It wasn't a frontline officer.
No, it was not. It was a police officer.
Police officer.
They work generally out of the office.
I think he's split between that, and I was under the impression of 50 Bay Street
Yeah.
this time.
Next time you come back, maybe answer that one. I'm sure it would be a reallocation. Maybe there's your beat officer.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Maybe help with the budget issue, as well as our new committee member of the Hamilton Police Services Board. Good to have that connection here on this committee.
And the second thing I'd like to ask is in regards to the new developments in the Caroline and Bay Street areas, with the new condos, the student hotels, etc. There's a lot more foot traffic in that area, and there's going to be more people moving into those areas. And I'm just wondering how that relates to current, I don't know where the staffing is for police, because I know we had a person who had submitted at one time during the start of the beginning of this session of the task force a letter about some problems in that area. They didn't come forward to further clarify the issue that they were having in that area, but now that there's going to be more homeowners in that area and more foot traffic, especially in that area, I'm just wondering where police are allocated as far as...
Actually, we spent a lot of time in evening shifts in that area, and you said there have been some issues with certain buildings that we've actually taken a very proactive approach on. And what we do is what they call building sweeps, where the action teams will actually come in and they'll go through each floor of the buildings that have been identified as high users of police service. And so we are proactively, we actually just call it problem-oriented policing project. So we identify the building, we set up a strategic plan to address the buildings, to target known offenders. And so we are quite aware of that issue, and we are actually working proactively on it.
A couple other things.
No problem, Tara. Let's go over
The
here.
west end of Gore, the lights have been out at night. I don't know if you're aware of that, Kathy, but the west end of the lights have been in
They're
Gore Park.
filming. They're probably taking the street lights out because they're throwing this great big beam down. They're filming a Christmas movie.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, but you know what? Can somebody check that it's not a malfunction and in fact that they've had a request? I'm sure there's some...
Because it's been for a few weeks, so.
Yeah, they've been filming for a few weeks.
West End?
The west end of Gore Park, the lights in the trees have been up to.
I know,
In front of the Connaught, they've been up on.
through you, Chair, I know Susie had a similar concern in her area with tree lighting. After speaking to the Parks folks, apparently it does happen this time of year. It's been particularly bad this year because of the freeze thaw. And what's happening is water's getting into some of the connections. So the police or the fire department actually recommended some of the lighting was to be turned off until we get a steady thaw, I guess you could say, which hopefully starts today. So I will definitely report back, but I thought I'd, through you, Chair,
Yeah,
mention that.
Yeah, that's good.
Another thing is, last week I ran into this. I was turning on to, making a left-hand turn onto King William, and there's actually somebody coming the wrong way. Unfortunately for him, there was a police cruiser sitting there, so we all allowed a police cruiser to make a viewing and get a ticket for that fellow. But what I noticed is he was coming out of the parking lot that was across the street from the Lister, and there are no directional signs indicating that that is a one-way street when you're coming out of either one of those parking ramps out of the parking lot. So if anybody is coming down actually James Street and entering into that parking lot on James Street and not knowing the city, would not know that that is a one-way street. So that could be a real problem. So there's no directional, there's no signs indicating that it's one way.
But there's only one way in.
Not if you come in on the James Street entrance.
Is there a James Street?
There's a James Street
Yeah.
entrance heading north onto that parking
The
lot.
planters were there. Okay.
So if somebody could,
Can I just,
and I went past there this morning just to make
Mr.
sure.
Chair, what was the exact location?
It's the parking lot which is behind, on King William. It's right across from the Lister Block and the Thai Memory.
The only one there is a massive parking lot.
It's a public park, but
So the
There should be some
exit
kind of-
entrance on the north side, that the fronts were back up.
and the only reason that came to my attention is because,
Yeah, we went the wrong way.
you know, and
Yeah.
just take it for granted, right? Because of what's wrong with it.
You know, another, while we're on it, another one is, and I saw it again this morning, Caroline, you know, this is the finger paint that we used to put on the roads now, and it's caused another accident this morning, right where the bus lane, where you don't see the lines. This one was the worst one I've seen. I think I've seen two or three now. And I've actually, this morning, shot a message to staff. I need a total of what's going on since the lines have faded, because it's consistent at the corner there where you to make the left at Catherine. Anyway, on Caroline, turning left on Main and heading south, people are forgetting it's two-way now and they're turning left consistently. It's like headers waiting to happen, although headers at 3 kilometers an hour because you're waiting at the light. So people are lined up, but sometimes it happens when the light is green and they're just flying past. You're in the left turn lane, and all of a sudden, going the wrong way are people. It's a line painting issue, Peter. You know what? I've already passed it along to staff. It just the issue is weather. Before we can paint, we need better weather. But maybe a topic for another day. Sorry, I cut you off. Did you have anything else, Terry?
Well, Glenn's left, but I wanted to ask him if there was any update on the Vermont sales office and the bingo hall. What's going on?
No update on the bingo hall. I've referred probably about 7 people now who called my office interested. I know Glenn's referred people as well who have great ideas for that space. It's privately owned. It's not owned by the city. Some people thought it was for some reason. Anything from a major 2,000-seater concert hall, which I thought was pretty neat, and to a grocery store, to I've heard some interesting ideas. Also an adaptive reuse and maybe adding some density has also been, they call me and I give them the contact for Zena, who owns the building.
Just on that, Mr. Chair, he has approached us to perhaps put some images of downtown in the windows to improve the experience.
As an interim?
As an interim.
And to your point earlier, if we can't adorn the entire Gore wall in question with that great idea before the end of April in your conference, there was a good idea on Twitter a couple of days ago with respect to at least some posters on the fencing. It's not our fencing, but it's our sidewalk, so we have to look into this. That explains what our heritage programs are all about, that can have people direct them to receive an update on how we just put 1,000 buildings on the buildings of interest list, images of adaptive reuse, Murray Street School, as at least something to direct the eye as opposed to, but it's a good spot for it because they're looking at this eyesore, but then they can see that we're being a proactive community. I'm more than happy to work with with you on that. I thought it was a great idea, it's inexpensive, and I would fund it through the board office just before your conference. When you mentioned the conference, I thought, you know, we keep talking about getting ready for Pan Am, Junos, but that's a big one. This is a big one coming. Yes, Terry, sorry.
Further to that, that's why I brought up about the Canot, because it looks like hell on the outside.
Yeah.
So I know they're addressing the inside, trying to get it ready.
Almost
for
done.
sales. Almost done. But I'm just wondering if they're going to be focusing a little bit on the outside.
Okay. I'm going for a tour. I'm going to put my hard hat on. I bugged them, and they said, okay, you can go look around.
Because really and truly, if they put up some kind of paneling, like you said, on the outside.
Well, we can design the size of the posters to make it work there as well. They're temporary, but it
Just
gives you a
temporary,
sense that
but-
things are moving, things are going on. Here's some of the policies we've recently put in place. Here's some pictures of buildings where we've made it work. Mary?
I've been meeting with Rudy for Doors Open, and you asked about his sales. They were going to be open for Doors Open, and they were going to be opening their sales office a week to 10 days prior to that. He called me yesterday, said it was the worst phone call he's ever had to make. They've lifted the marble off the floor, and they were intending to use the original stone that's underneath that flooring. And they had checked it in a couple of spots, thought they knew what they were dealing with until they got it all uncovered. And the contractor says it's going to take 5 to 7 weeks to fix that floor because it is serious trouble under what they lifted. So he's not going to be in Doors Open, and he's not going to be opening a sales office.
For 5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, and with regards to the outside, that's going to be all commercial shops again. All around the perimeter, and they are working. If you've noticed, some of the boards are down. They're working on repairing all of those window areas along the street level. But we had a tour, it is looking terrific. Terrific. The main floor is going to have a deli on it, as well. The lobby floor is going to have a deli on it, as well as hopefully the reinvention of the sidecar bar so that you could clandestinely meet someone and one would come off the parking lot, the other one in the front door. Nobody knew you were there. Trust me, I don't know about that.
Well, don't put my name to that.
So
I'm a good girl.
Yeah, so.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Mary, we appreciate that. I'll have to look into that. But at least they're doing the job right.
Yes, they are. That's what he said.
I thank all the staff for taking the time and sharing with us what they know, and look forward to the reporting back that we've asked for our next meeting. And why don't we close by shooting for a date for that next meeting, or at least a ballpark date for the next meeting?
We do after the walk, like we're at the end of May for the meeting, and then have the walk.
In between? Okay. How's that sound, everybody?
I'll send you.
Thank you. So we're going to shoot for a walk in between now and the end of May for the next meeting, but that'll be a meeting too, obviously, if the walk takes some time. All right?
And you want Joe and I to get in contact with you and Glenn regarding.
Yeah, Fridays are good. Fridays you're always at Seaworks, right, Joe?
Yeah.
It might not be this, but next Friday will work for me.
Okay.
Move to adjourn. Moved by Colin, seconded by Kathy. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Laurie. Good job. Good.